So welcome to Oldenburg, everybody. It's great to see you here finally. Also, a warm welcome to our online participants. And don't check your emails. We'll be watching you. Today we're here to get into discussions of music and hearing health. Why that? Well, as we all know, music is part of all human cultures, and humans have been into music for at least 40,000 years. But it seems that researchers are only at the beginning of this century really determined to figure out whether and how music is more than auditory cheesecake. So we're observing a flurry of research activities when it comes to questions regarding the benefits of musical training, on hearing in general, but also on things like speech understanding. We're observing research in the direction of asking what are the effects of musical activities on elderly people and people with dementia. We're also observing a lot of very general research approaches, asking what is the nature of musicality, why are some people considering themselves as being musical, whereas others don't. And there's also research on why children pick up music. This is channeled also by a few or by several research events and networks, and I would like to mention just a few. So last year we had the Neurosciences and Music Conference in Aarhus, connecting with music across the lifespan. And in Canada we have the Singwell Network, Singing for People with Communication Challenges, that's led by Frank Russo. We also have emerging interest from the hearing science perspective. So there I would like to mention the Music and Cochlear Implant Symposium, which happened in Cambridge this year, and Niels has been involved in the initial organization. A very nice conference was the Hearing Aids for Music Conference in Leeds in 2017, led by Alinka. Next year we have the ARO Winter Meeting with a session on music that's led by Denise Biskent. And in the UK, we also have the Oral Diversity Network going on. So hearing health is hard to constrain to isolated academic disciplines, I would say. And in this workshop, we try to consider the topic from a broad angle involving both psychological and technological approaches. And so in this workshop, we're looking at how much we're actually exposed to loud sound. We consider hearing impairment and its effect on music. We hear about music-based interventions to quality of life. We address how individual differences play out in music. And we also ask how one could possibly remix audio for people with hearing impairments. So here you have a word cloud that's generated from our own abstract booklet. And here we have the top 50 words. And I like to generate from this new research ideas. For example, on the left-hand side, you have the experience implant. That might be a good next research project. But what you can see is sort of a broad overview here. So with this event, we are trying to give a forum to both established and young scholars. And so we're looking forward to learning from each other across generations, not only across disciplines, so both across disciplines and across generation learning. Our Music and Hearing Health Workshop is the first international event of this kind to happen in Germany, at least to our knowledge, and we're really happy to have you here. Thanks for traveling in these days where traveling is not always easy. So we're in Germany, but where in Germany are we exactly? I guess the town is called Oldenburg, and here you see some pictures that are characteristic for Oldenburg. We have the Oldenburg Schloss, which used to be home to the Grand Dukes until the November Revolution of 1918, and since then is public domain and open source, of course. We have Grünkohl, the favorite Oldenburg dish. It's only a winter dish, so please visit us again if you like to have some Grünkohl, but you should plan for a couple of days because it takes a while to digest. And we also have regional beer, and we are looking forward to enjoying some of that tonight with you. More seriously, Oldenburg, as Gunther alluded to, is also a hub when it comes to hearing science. We have the research cluster Hearing for All, which looks at hearing deficits from very broad perspectives, including biology, psychology, engineering, etc. And we have, since 2018, the Collaborative Research Center HAPA, which stands for Hearing Acoustic Perceptive Principles and Applications. We have extra university infrastructure in terms of the Herzzentrum and the Fraunhofer, which helps to translate basic research into applications. So if we look at our workshop, we have a nice equal distribution in North America. And we have also a good distribution of participants in Central Europe. I think next time we should work on Southern Europe as well. And then we are fully representative of Europe in some sense. We're really looking forward to our two keynotes. We're happy to have Denise Busquin from Groningen here with us. She will speak right after this session on effects of auditory training for hearing impaired individuals. And tomorrow morning, Chris Plack will start the day with a talk on effects of age on pitch and harmony perception. We're really happy to have these two esteemed scholars with us, and we're looking forward to their talks. Just to give you a brief overview of the program, as I said, we'll go on with our keynote, Denise Busquin, after this session. Then in the afternoon, we'll have two sessions, one on hearing impairment and one on health effects. And then the day closes with our Golden Ear Challenge. Tomorrow, we'll have our keynote speaker, Chris Plack, then a session on remixing. And after lunch, we'll have a session on individual differences and exposure. In terms of the speakers for the oral sessions, in the hearing impairment session, we have Alinka Greasley with us from Leeds. We have Sina Tamasebi from Hanover with us. And then joining in an online talk, we have Bernhard Richter from Freiburg. The second session on health effects will be started by Ulrike Frischen from the University of Oldenburg here. Then we'll have Stine Alfweis from Hanover. And Xi-Yun Lo and Frank Russo joining online at the end of the day. Tomorrow, then, we'll have the remixing session with Trevor Agus from Belfast. Then we'll have, again, a talk by people from the Hanover group, Jonas Althoff. Then we'll have our own Hendrik Kaiser from Oldenburg. And then the session on individual differences will be started off by David Sears from Texas Tech University. We'll have Franziska Deger from the Max Planck Institute of Empirical Statics in Frankfurt. And we'll have Martin Bleichner from Oldenburg. And in the final session tomorrow, we'll have Niels Hendrik van Toppedam from Ericsson Research Center, Omid Kokabi from Mimi Hearing Technologies in Berlin, and Sam Kauth from Manchester. Okay, so not everything will be equally accessible online. So here are some on-site highlights. So sorry online participants, you probably won't be able to get the full share of these highlights. So tomorrow, tonight, we'll have the Golden Ear Challenge with an ensemble from Bremen, the Kammer Ensemble Consonance, and there we'll have a sort of gamified live experiment on how good your music perception is, and the winner of that experiment will receive that award there. So better get your skills ready. Tomorrow we'll have a poster session. Really looking forward to that from 10 to 11:30. And anytime you are welcome to play ping pong with us. It's sort of a tradition in our lab that we from time to time get together and play ping pong. I see Alinka likes this idea. And it's outside there if you just go outside from the lobby. I heard also the ping pong or the table tennis world championship is going on exactly right now at the same time. This should inspire us even more. Okay, so regarding the background of this workshop, we are funded by a Freigeist Fellowship from the Volkswagen Foundation. The Freigeist Fellowship, I will talk about it in a little bit more detail. It basically funds our whole group. And just a note about the Volkswagen Foundation, it is not, as the name suggests, tied to the company, but it's originally it received its name through this historic process in the 1960s where the stocks of the Volkswagen Foundation got sold. And so the foundation that's now private and independent from the company got its endowment from. So don't worry, we are not fully engaged in car sound acoustics. Although it's somewhat telling for this country that the largest scientific foundation has a name of a car company. A good or bad sense. So logistics, final announcement. Please tell us if you don't like to appear in photos or videos. Poster presenters, please put up your posters. And if you like, send it to us so we can put it on the website and present it to the public. All speakers, please check your slides in advance. We're using this PC, this computer, and you can talk to our tech team here to transfer your presentation in advance. So please come here before your session is starting. And then we should all try to use PowerPoint's laser pointer if you use PowerPoint, because then the PowerPoint, the laser pointer will be transferred online as well. If you have questions, on-site participants, please give a sign and wait for the mic. And remote participants, please use the chat, and then the chair of the respective session will give you or will read out the question. Okay, so this is the end of my introductory remarks. Thank you for coming. Let's make the most of these 2 days. It's really great to have you all here. I think we can really get into a very intense and sort of very small workshop intense mode to be able to speak to everyone. That will be really fun. And now I'm gonna change gears a little bit, and I will present you what we're doing in our group, which is called the Music Perception and Processing Lab. So as I said, we are funded by a Freigeist Fellowship from the Volkswagen Foundation, and we started off in 2020, running right into the pandemic as we started, so we needed to change a lot of plans we had. But I'm going to try to give you an update of what we're working on, and then you'll also see the most important people here, the PhD students involved in the lab, to give you a short account of what they're working on these days. The basic question that we're asking in this project is, look, you're in this concert, you're sitting at the back, and what you see in front of you is an audience that is at times, let's say above 50, right? And we all know that people in this audience might have difficulties hearing out the violin parts from this violin concerto that they are about to hear very soon. And we're asking how much of this violin will actually be represented in their brain when they listen to this concert, which not only has the violin, but also a massive orchestral accompaniment. So that's a basic question that we're asking in this project. What about the sound of music for hearing impaired listeners? What's actually going on when people lose hearing and when they still try to listen to music? And of course, hearing loss is nothing surprising to music history. It has been sort of intertwined with music history for a long time. Beethoven is the example probably for that. And today later, we will hear in much more detail by Bernhard Richter about Beethoven's case. But also today, hearing loss is, of course, an issue. Sound levels are increasing on stage. And here we see the example of Brian Johnson, singer of a famous rock group, who needed to quit performing because he couldn't hear his fellow musicians anymore. The whole topic has also been recently taken up by Hollywood. So if you have not seen this movie, I think it's quite interesting sound design here. So it's a story of a metal drummer who loses hearing. And so the whole situation, I think, is becoming more considered in the public domain as well. If we jump back into the research world, then there's, of course, a literature also on these issues. We're not claiming here that we're the first ones to do this, not at all. So there have been interesting surveys and lab experiments on this topic. For example, Sarah Madsen and Brian Moore did a survey on music and hearing aids, where they had a very rich array of findings, one of which was that live music is a serious issue for hearing aids due to distortion. Alinka Greasley will hopefully tell us more about her study in her talk later, and she also saw very diverse experiences of patients and audiologists when it comes to hearing aids and music. More detailed lab experiments include the one by Kirchberger and Russo, notably their adaptive music perception task, where they found that basically all musical dimensions that are based on discriminating frequency features are affected by hearing loss. So there, in these frequency feature dimensions, people with hearing loss and people without hearing loss performed very differently. And Jonathan Weisberg looked at commercial hearing aids and what their music programs did to music sound quality. And he found that these music programs in commercially available hearing aids only inconsistently improve musical sound quality, which means that when you get your hearing aid, and you switch on your music program, it's not really clear whether it will improve your sound quality or not. Meaning there's still a lot more to do. Currently, we're still in the process of running a larger survey to characterize the situation in Germany, together with the Deutsche Orchesterverband and the Deutsche Chorverband, so the German Orchestral Society and the German Choir Society. Please come see our poster. I just want to mention 3 points that I find interesting. So the first one is on hearing protection. So around 50% of our respondents, so these are all professional orchestral musicians, like they play in German orchestras for a living. And 50% of them say that they have trouble, or problems at least, using hearing protection because they can't hear their fellow musicians. Then we asked them whether they had been diagnosed a hearing loss, and 28% of our respondents said they had diagnosed hearing loss. So if we go to a concert in Germany, we can say every 4th musician has an issue with hearing. And regarding the aspect of hearing aids, we asked whether they feared losing respect among colleagues when they would wear hearing aids on stage. And around 40%, or a little bit more than 40%, responded that this was the case. So we seem to have, we seem to observe this stigma related to hearing aids, which we of course also expected to some extent. But this is of course affecting a daily life of professional musicians in a quite profound way. There are much more aspects to discuss here. I think we should do that at the poster. Okay, let me just try to draw a brief comparison to speech. So I've been talking about music perception and hearing loss so far. And in speech, it's very clear that problems with speech understandings arise when it comes to complex acoustic situations, essentially when auditory scene analysis is involved. So when the components of multiple sound sources need to be disentangled. And that's very intuitive. People know it from sort of their basic intuition that once it gets noisy, speech is hard to understand, and this is even more a problem for hearing impaired people, of course. So one perspective that we're exploring in our project is this basic analogy to see how much this also holds for music. So auditory scene analysis, just to give you a brief definition of that term, denotes the ways in which the ear and the brain make sense of sound mixtures. We have usually in music, we encounter mixes from multiple instruments. They overlap in time, but also in frequency, and this makes auditory scene analysis a very difficult problem. And then the ear is supposed to make sense of these mixtures. And of course, the information that the brain receives for this process is very different if we compare normal hearing people and hearing impaired people. And our question is, how is sensorineural hearing loss affecting this process, and what happens with auditory scene analysis and the perception of music when hearing gets impaired? I mean, I don't need to tell you, I guess, that polyphonic music is at the heart of at least Western musical tradition. There's evidence for notated polyphony dates back to the 10th century. Here, this piece was discovered rather recently, where some German monks close to Düsseldorf, I think, notated very early signs of polyphony. So it has been, of course, intertwined with music history in the West for forever, so to say. The fact that we rather prefer multiple things happening at the same time in music compared to just one thing. And research on musical scene analysis also has quite a history. So there's a seminal article by Stephen McAdams and Al Breckman from 1979, Hearing Musical Streams, where they outline various musical scenarios where auditory scene analysis is really essential. David Huron then derived traditional voice leading principles from the foundations of auditory scene analysis, and other authors like Daniel Presnitzer, Clara Suit, and Shiab Sharma outlined how the multiple affordances of music can give rise to ambiguity and thus pleasure. So the link that we're making is to connect auditory scene analysis research in music with hearing impairment. And our basic hypothesis is that processes of perceptual organization are a critical aspect of why music listening is difficult for hearing impaired listeners and how music processing for hearing aids may be improved. Okay, I see I'm running out of time to get into the details here, but just to mention two projects that we previously worked on. Gunther already mentioned this paper. Here we basically characterized musical scene analysis abilities as a measure of signal-masker level ratio, so sort of an analogy to the speech recognition thresholds, where we can objectively quantify differences between different groups of subjects. And what we found there was that hearing impairment and combined with age in this sample actually had a big issue or had a big effect on these melody and timbre perception tasks, so differences of 10 dB of signal to mask level ratio. And we also saw that hearing impaired listeners cannot as easily make sense of segregation cues, so dips in the signal compared to normal hearing listeners. In a more ecological scenario, we also looked at Bach's Art of the Fugue and tracked listeners' performance in following individual voices in these polyphonies. I must skip the details for the sake of time. Here we also observed that timbre cues didn't help hearing impaired listeners, whereas they helped normal hearing listeners. And we also observed that hearing aids didn't really help, although I must say this was a sort of a study that was heavily affected by the pandemic. So there we would need to follow up with a larger N for that claim. Okay, let me briefly transition to what we're currently doing and what the whole team is doing. We're not only looking at Bach or sort of artificial stimulus scenarios, but these days we're working a lot with popular music excerpts. So this I would call our standard model of music. Of course, popular music is ubiquitous everywhere. And acoustically, it can be roughly characterized as often comprising a percussive, impulsive drum track. It comprises usually low frequency bass instruments, accompanying instruments like the guitar and keyboards, and it also usually features lead vocals. And we'll hear in a second about the specific role of lead vocals. We're here using mostly the medley database, which is a multi-track data set for popular music, which is quite handy in that respect. Okay, so regarding the structure of or our map of the different research projects that we're looking at in the lab, we could divide that into a microscopic and macroscopic approach. And into a perception and processing stream, so to say. When it comes to macroscopic aspects, Robin will tell you in a second about a project looking at individual differences in auditory scene analysis. Then a microscopic approach to auditory scene analysis is to consider attention effects in musical scenes, and Michael will tell you about that in a second. Then we have the processing stream where Aravindan is going to tell you about approaches to remixing, also which is sort of more macroscopic, and then looking at the microscopic features that identify musical instruments. Simon will tell you about his project as well. So with this, I hope to have given you an overview of sort of the general approach, what we do here. And now I would like to invite the team to come up and just give you more insights of what they do.